Welcome back, CSE 235 class or CSE 103 class, to Rock, Paper, Scissors, Spring 2018 version. And what we did in the first part of the video was just kind of set up our HTML, a little bit of CSS, so we floated our two image areas next to each other. And now what we're going to do is start working in our JavaScript pane down here in CodePen and making sure that we can basically click on a button and show an image. But first what we have to do is make some variables so that we can put our images in here. And what we're going to do, again, we're not just putting the image in the page, because if we did that, we could put that we would put our image right here and it would be there to start. But what we're going to do is have nothing to start and then have JavaScript basically display that image. So what JavaScript will do is insert some HTML into here where the image, where it says that word image with brackets on it, it will insert HTML code that will be an image source tag. So we're going to create a variable that represents that image source tag, and then we're going to target that particular ID and say, hey, let's throw this code in here, and it'll display a picture. And it could either display a random one or one when we click a button. So let's do that. So I could look at my notes and see how to do that. We're going to create a variable. Now, I may change variable names. Every time I do this, I sometimes do it a little bit differently. This way I did it with capital I's for IMG. I think I'm going to use dashes because I use dash BTN for button. Maybe I'll use dash IMG. That way I could keep everything lowercase. That's one way of keeping things consistent. Again, whatever you need to do to keep things consistent that works for you is what you need to do, but I'm going to try that just after doing this a couple times. And again, we're just going to put a URL in here that represents, it's basically my website going to an image folder with an image in it. That's all it's really doing. So we're just going to write an image source tag and put the entire source tag in quotes so that it gets inserted as almost a text or string inside that HTML code. So let's start with that. So we're going to do var. So we're going to use the var keyword, and we're going to give a variable name, and we're going to call it, the first one we'll just call rock image, and again I'm going to use a dash here. And actually I said I was going to use a dash, now I can't. And you might say, well, why can't you use a dash image? Because it's a variable name, and because there's a dash in it, it looks like it could be confused with a minus sign. So sometimes variables won't let you put a dash in there, and I said that without thinking about it. And I should probably, I think what I'll do is just do that, just do rock image and don't put anything in there. I'll just, I could use a capital I as a separator, but I'll just put rock image and go from there. That way I don't have to deal with any capital letters or uppercase letters. So I'll do that, and then I'll say var rock image, and what does it equal? It's going to equal an image source tag. So I'm just going to type this rather than use emit. I'm just going to put quotes. I'm just going to start my tag and just do image source equals, and then in here I'll just end my quote, and then I'll kind of close this off. I think if you highlight this, highlight the whole thing, and then just do a single quote, it should put a quote around everything. So that should be set up to work like that, so that you don't have to, you don't get the single, a pair of single quotes here, and then you got to delete one, and sometimes that could be a pain. So CodePen is set up so that you could highlight things and it'll auto-complete your quote. So if you just highlight what you want and put the single quotes around them. And notice that we're alternating double quotes on the inside, single quotes on the outside, or they could be vice versa, whichever way you'd want it. If you want double quotes on the outside, you could have done that too. Now I'm going to put my URL in here, and it's going to be http:// I actually don't have to put, I don't think I have to put the www. I think it'll work just like that. homostudio.com, and it's /img, and it's / whatever the image name is. And I think the image, I kept them very simple. It's just rock JPEG. And again, here's the closing tag, opening tag, closing bracket or HTML bracket, and then everything looks okay here. I'm going to put a semicolon to kind of finish off this statement. Now once you have that, it should be okay. And if you weren't even sure about this, like if you're like, well, do I have that right? Highlight it and just go to a new tab and just type it in. See what it goes to. Look at that, there it is. So it works. So it got to the right place. So I'm just going to copy this 2 more times and change it to be the paper and scissors. So I'll change the rock to paper. I'll change this part to scissors, and then same thing here. This one will be paper, and this one will be scissors. So I should have those correct. I'll stretch this out so they all kind of fit on one line, and you can see I spelled scissors wrong here. So double check all your code. Don't wait until you have tons of code to start going through and finding spelling errors. Check everything right now. and make sure you have things spelled right. So that's scissors img, paper img, rock img. You have rock, paper, scissors here. Kind of check things as you go. Now the next variable we'll make will actually be a variable that represents an array, which is a list of things, because we're now going to put these things in a list. So I'm going to do, I'll just put an extra space and I'll do var, and I think I called these, let me double check what I called them, random image, because we don't need a list when we just put our image in there because we already have image names, but for the list itself, we're going to call this list random images, I guess, or at least that's what I did. So I'll just call it rnim, img. I'll keep it the way I'm doing this one, but this is going to be the random image list, really. And I'll say equals, and I'll put my brackets here, because that's where I put an array inside the brackets, and then I'm really going to put these in here. So I'm just going to copy these, and I could even just paste them, and I'll copy this one, and I'll put a comma and paste it, and I'll copy this one and put a comma and paste it. Now you might say, oh, well, now I'm just going to put my quotes around these. No, you will not put quotes around these, because these are variables. If you put quotes around them, they would be strings. They would represent the text. So these actually represent these, and that's a great thing, because then we don't have to keep using this long URL every time. Now we could use this. So these things represent these, and this rn image represents all three of them, represents the list of them, which we're going to pull from that. So I'll put a semicolon here, and what we're going to do next is create a function that actually generates a random number, and it's going to have to be a random number of 0, 1, or 2, and pulls from here and actually plucks one of these things and makes it display. The random one is going to display here, because this is the computer choice is the random one. The one we do is going to be whatever button we hit, but this is going to be random, so we're only working on the one that shows up right here. So we're going to do that first, and we're going to start a function right after doing these variables. So let's just take a look at our instructions, and here we're going to call the function pickRock, and for our functions we will use capital letters. So I'm going to use pickRock when I use my function names. I'll use that camel case to do that, so I won't just run it all together. I will use the capital R when I do that. So for all my functions, I'll use camel case where I can, if there's two words. And we're going to generate a random number. And remember, our random numbers in JavaScript only go from up to 1, so we have to multiply it by 3 to get 3 numbers, and then we're going to round it down with floor. So let's go and do that. Let's start off our function first. So we're going to create a function, use the function keyword in JavaScript, and I'll give it a space here just to separate it. And we're going to give it a name, and I'll call it pickRock, because that's what we're going to do here. We're going to pick rock, so when we click rock, it'll go here. And when we pick rock, we're going to choose ours, and then it's also going to put a random one here. So that's why we're doing this first, because these functions are being generated by these buttons. So we're starting with the first button to generate a function. So let's do that. We're going to pick rock, and have to put my parentheses here. We're not putting any arguments in there. We'll just say pickRock. And then what we're going to do first, because we want a random number generated every new time we click a button, we want a new random number generated. So we want to make sure a random number is generated within the function, so it's always completely random each time. So we're going to do something called math.random, but we're also going to make a variable that represents that. So we'll just call it rn. var ran equals math.random. And we could define a variable inside a function, and we'll call it rn. And we're going to do math, it's capital M. And math random will generate a random number just like that. That'll generate a random number. So if we did that, we would generate a random number. And again, just to, I'll put a semicolon here, just to see this, after my function, I'm actually going to run my function. I'll just say pickRock to run it, so that it actually runs. And then I'm going to do console log. Okay, and I want to make sure I have console log inside the function, so it generates it, and then it does it. Now when it runs the function, it does all that kind of stuff. So there it is. There's my number. Let's kind of run it again. I think if we do Shift Command 5, it generates a new one on a Mac. It's Shift Control 5 on Windows, and you can see what it's doing. It's generating a random number, and it's only going to go up to just about 1, and it'll go down to 0. So what we want to do is we want to kind of round that down, but we want to take it up to 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take this one and multiply it by 3. And now you can see it's generating a 1. And I'll just do it again. There it's doing 1. So we want to do this, multiply it by 3. And then we're going to round it down. And to round it down, we do this math.floor. Floor rounds down, ceil rounds up. So we want to round it down. And there's also a round, which just rounds it to the nearest number, but we want to round it down. So it goes down to 0, and actually the 2.9 or whatever it would go up to would actually be rounded down. So the 3 here is going to be kind of the total numbers, total like group of numbers that'll come up here, like 0, 1, and 2, or it would be 1, 2, and 3. So when we go back here, we're going to do that math.floor, and we have to kind of reassign Rn. That's why we're going to do Rn equals, and we'll do math.floor. We can't just do math.floor. We won't know what we're talking about. So we want to do math.floor and then kind of do that, and then put the Rn inside here so it knows that it's basically rounding down whatever number we came up with. So it's kind of rounding down itself. So we're going to generate a random number times 3, and then we're going to say that random number is going to equal to math.floor, and we're going to round it down. So I got an NaN there because that was before I had it right yet. I had it finished. So let me go back here. Sometimes you could just kind of put a semicolon here. It'll generate a new one. Or you can do Shift Command 5 or Shift Control 5, and it should generate a new one. And it should just use 0, 1, and 2. You shouldn't get a 3. You shouldn't get anything else. You should just get either a 0, 1, and a 2, and you can kind of test it a little bit. And again, what I'm doing here is I kind of generated a function. I put the console log in there. At first I was trying to put the console log outside of there, but I put it inside there, so it's kind of outputting it just to this console window, or console, I should say. This is the console, and you're outputting it to the console, and then this is running the function that's doing it. So I'm just running it right here. It's not being generated by any button or anything. So I have my number working fine. That's all. So that's fine. So my number's working. I could get rid of this console. That's all I needed, was just to make sure my number was being generated. So let me close that up. And I could keep this running right now because it'll kind of show what I'm doing. So even if I put a little slash there just to comment, 2 slashes to comment it for now, then I can open up and just test it out before I even make the button. So now what I want to do, now that I generated a random number from 1 and 2, what I want to do is take that number and basically kind of pull something from my array, because this would be 0, this would be 1, this would be 2. So we're going to generate an image from there. So what we're going to do next, we can look at our instructions here. We're going to use this document.getElementById, and we're going to do cchoice is going to get the random one, and the one that's your choice, or Y choice, is going to get whatever image you use. So we're going to do that next. So that's going to be inside the function, and we're going to do the document.getElementById, and the ID we're going to use for the first one is going to be cchoice. And this should be in quotes, so you could highlight it and then put the quotes around it after the fact. Document.getElementById. Then we're going to use inner HTML to actually write the HTML to the page. And equals, what it's going to be equal to is going to be to the array, the Rn image array, and the index number of that is going to be, if it was 0, let's say I just put 0 in here. If I did that, and I ran my function, let's just do this, it shows a rock. Now why does it show a rock? Because I'm saying document.getElementById cchoice, which is this area, this div, with an ID of cchoice, and I'm writing HTML to there, which is these things. And if I say random image, the array, if I say take the random image array and use the first index, it's going to take rock image, and it's going to display it, and it's going to go, where's rock image? And it's going to go up here to the var rock image and say, okay, take that code and display it on the page. And just to show you what happened, I'm going to actually open this up in a new window here. And this helps if you open a new window, and I'm going to do control, or you can right click and just do inspect. And if I inspect this, if I go over here and inspect it, you could see, if I go, I'll click on this thing here. If I go over here, you could see what it wrote to the page. Here's my tag, image src http homastudio.com image rock. So it wrote that code to the page. So that's my finished code. This is dynamic. The JavaScript created this HTML. It wasn't there to start. The JavaScript made it write that code to the page. So if there's ever an error or anything, you know, you could always go to console here and see if there's any kind of error. And actually, it's just saying mixed content, but actually there's no red error or anything like that. But you could always look at your elements on a page and kind of see what everything is. It helps sometimes with, you know, there I can see that there's my p tag. It has a natural kind of space above and below that I didn't change. Here's my div image area, and I could, you know, if I look at the style, I could find that it has a margin right and it's floated and all that kind of stuff. You know, if I clicked on that, if I clicked on div ID, I could see it. There's my div of cchoice. Here's my div of image area, and there's my styles. Float left, margin right. I put those in there. Here's one. It says display block. Now that's a default. I didn't put that in, but I put it in this one that said image area, float, margin right. So there's my style. So this inspect area is a very, you know, this is more for the 235 class, but this is a nice area to kind of really see what's going on. But if you have errors, because CodePen doesn't show you all your errors and doesn't give you all the details sometimes, if you go in here, but you have to open up a new window. You don't want to do it in the CodePen area. You almost want to open it here. It'll be easier to find it if you open it up in this window, and that means you have to OK your email when you signed up for the free CodePen. So anyway, let me get out of there, and I'll just even close this, and I'll get back to here, and my window, I have to stretch this out. Not the whole window. Let me stretch out this part. And it's working right now, but it's working. It's just running the function. Now let me copy this, and I'm going to put this here. Now, again, I don't want 0 here. I actually want RN because I want it to be random. I want it to be whatever happens to pop up. So if I go here and go back, it might run a rock. It might run, oh, actually, let me change this to Y choice because that one's overriding this one. So now I have two of them side by side. Remember, Y choice, this one's getting the ID from Y choice, which is this one. Where's Y choice? There it is. There's my Y choice. So it's taking that one and it's putting into Y choice. It's just targeting that area. And in that one, it is using 0. And you could actually do this, although it'd be more kind of make more sense to yourself if you just wrote the variable name, which happens to be rock image. So it's better off just doing that. That will make more sense to you. But rock image and RN image with a 0 is the same thing, but you might as well just use rock image. So this is the random one, and if you keep doing this, I'll do Shift Control 5. You could almost play the game by choosing rock. Now you just lost. You just lost again. Now you tied. Now you won because you can crush scissors with your rock. So that's kind of the start of this. So that's the first part. And again, we're only focusing on picking rock. Now the idea of picking rock is not running the function this way. The idea of picking rock is going to be clicking the button. So what we're going to do next is go up into our HTML, and I'm even going to copy this. Why not? Or actually, I'll cut it from here because I don't need it. I'll cut this, not the semicolon. So I'll cut it and get rid of the semicolon, and I'll go up into my HTML, and we're going to do button. We already have ID. We're going to do onClick, and I'm just going to do onClick. Make sure you put a space, and then put your double quotes, and I'll paste in my function, and that's what you want. And you want to make sure you got it right first before you start copying things. So we have button onClick equals pickRock, and the ID is rock button. That's the one we want, and that's the way. So we're only focusing on just making our rock button work. So we want to make sure that that functions and it runs the function that we just created down here. So the function we created was pickRock. So we're only focusing on everything that happens when we pick rock. So when we pick rock, it's generating a random number times 3, and it's round, which is 1 times 3, which gives a choice of 3 random numbers, and we're rounding it down so it does 0, 1, and 2, so it doesn't go all the way up to 3. And it's generating in this area of cchoice, it's generating an image, which is actually going to be the array, a random index from the array, either 0, 1, or 2, and it'll generate an image here, and this one is doing rock. So every time it'll be rock here. So when I click here, it's rock. If I click again, it's rock. Click again, it's always rock over here, and this is the random one. So this is showing up random. So this time it's scissors, so every time I do it, it's generating them both each time, but it's always going to be rock here, and it's going to be a different one here. And there'll be a lot of ties because there's only 3 of them. So that works so far. So that's the first thing that works. And that's a good start to this, that you have your images displaying once you get that, because you want to make sure things are working before you start copying and pasting code. And you want to make sure you understand the way you're naming things. That's important too. So I think I'll take a break here. This will be the end of part 2. So we have our images displaying, and that's a big step. And then we'll keep building on our functions, and then we'll start copying our functions and adding more functionality to our functions. So we'll stop here with part 2.